I'm about to hop off the stage to play trombone on this one, but it is a fun song that mixes science and art, as we are wont to do on this assembly. It's one you could totally try to sing along to and maybe move hips or various assorted limbs. So I would encourage you, why don't we stand up and let's sing along this thing. I'm going to let them take it away.
Listen, I know that last month I jokingly said, "Band, go away, leave the stage," as if I were a very angry, grumpy person. That was a joke. I apologize. So, thank you, band. I'm in the band. That was weird. Thank you all for coming to Sunday Assembly in Atlanta. We are a secular community, so we do all the cool things that churches do, just without the God part. And there's a whole lot of really cool stuff that can be celebrated and thought about and explored within that domain. And what could be a more perfect distillation of that than the ideas of science, art, and wonder. Our motto is literally live better, help often, and wonder more. Right? This is one of the core tenets of what we do. So I'm really excited to be having this theme, exploring these interactions, and having a wonderful speaker from a really cool group by the exact same name here today. And so thank you so much for coming, giving us a shot. I'm curious how many people here are here for the first time. You can raise your hand. Who's trying us out? Thank you. Can we give them some claps? Thank you for enduring a song you probably didn't know the words to. That's fine.
All right, what is up? So, assemblies are a mix of lots of different segments, and one of the very first ones we're going to do is we're going to have a reading with Dan, who I'm going to hope is ready, but instead I'm going to stall a little bit so that he has time to pull up this really cool poem that we've got. It's all about creating art and the act of doing that very thing. And while I continue to vamp, while he looks at our Facebook Messenger chat, where I shared this with him, I'm not sure he's going to pick the one on the website or the one I just pasted and he's going to just read. I don't know. Which would be better? I don't know, because they're both going to be the same. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask us to give him a polite applause while we start. Thank you. I prepared a lot for this. This is called Art and Nature by Elton Glasser. Glasser's right pronunciation? Glaser? Oh. Elton Glaser. He was painting the sky, not painting images of sun and clouds on canvas, no slapping paint across the sky itself. It was a painting on plain air, on plain air. There was a theory behind it. Of course, a theory so big it didn't matter anymore. A map the size of the territory. Go tell it to the birds, he would say. But the birds didn't care. They were flying nonchalantly through the sky. He would paint them too. The red birds blue and the bluebirds red. Of course, the paint would drip everywhere. But it didn't matter. It didn't always. That's what the rag was for, and the little blade. As someone said, if art was not difficult, it would not be art. The critics hadn't found the right word for it yet. Not exactly realism, and not quite surrealism, not even subrealism. But he couldn't wait for the critics to make up their minds. He just kept painting while the sun was out. At the end of the day, his work was done. He put away his paints, and the sun put itself away, and the clouds likewise. It was so dark he couldn't see the grass around his feet. No longer green, but a ground of many colors, still wet, like some kaleidoscope of dew. Ah, what would be the paint tomorrow? A seascape? He thought of the water, wave after wave, and his small brush dabbling in the shallows, stroking out into the deep. Thank you. And thank you for not reading the rest of our texts. I really appreciate that. I read that and I sent it to Dan, and I didn't even quite have the image in my head of exactly what was going on there, where someone was just standing on a cliffside, just doing this. And I think that's really cool. It's such a really cool image that evokes an intersection between art and the subject that it could actually be upon, an entire mountainside. I think that's really cool, and starts to get into where we're going today about this, its interaction with the physical world and the study of that. So I'm going to click this button now. So up next we've got a segment that we'd love to do called I'm Doing My Best. And I'll go ahead and tell Lewis that since this is that video I was saying, you're going to want to go ahead and swap to the Chrome tab that has that and bring it up. Because this I'm Doing My Best is not from someone who is in this room right now. This is going to be from, Jared is going to be talking and Leah in the background making snide comments. And they've been organizers for us, and they are on a, is it 10-month journey across South America, which is really cool. And so we asked them, and they wanted to share a little bit of an update about where they're at and how they are doing their best and going to a bunch of places that I know I have never been, which is really cool. Actually, it should be a YouTube video that may or may not be there. Is it not there? Did I not leave the tab open? Okay, so we're going to take a moment while I pull that thing up, and I need to apologize to Lewis. Give me a second.
Can we read the rest of your text?
No. That wasn't very private. Let's just say that was really awesome. Going on. Okay, so we're going to go to my email. Yeah, you can still play some Spotify, hope that it's not an advertisement. Oh, you know what it is?
stop music. I can stop music. Click with it. Okay, now we're going to hear even more dulcet tones from Jared, right here. Here we go.
Jared and I are checking in from Santiago to say hello and tell you we all miss you very much. And here is this month's I'm Doing My Best from Jared.
Thank you, Leah. Like she said, we're now in Santiago. We've been here for about 24 hours or a little more, and we'll be spending 2 weeks here, which is the longest we've stayed in any one place since Quito, Ecuador, back in August. For those new to the group or don't know what we're doing, we are taking a career break, 10 months off from our jobs, and slowly traveling our way around the continent of South America. We started in Ecuador, ran through Peru pretty quickly for a country as big as it is, hopped over through Bolivia, and are now inching down the coast in the Central Valley of Chile. You say, wow, that's an awesome 10-month vacation. To which I would have to reply, and we would agree, it's not a vacation. Traveling the way we're doing right now is actually a lot of work. We're seeing some amazing things, but it takes a lot of effort and energy to do what we're doing. And just a lot of faith in ourselves that we'll be able to just keep solving every problem that appears in front of us and keep moving on and keep enjoying what we're doing here. But travel is our job. No one's paying us to do it, we're paying ourselves in the form of personal growth and self-improvement. But it's definitely work. Now, it is nice that I haven't had to serve any customers for months and months and months now. I can't say that I missed that aspect. But what's true is that little bits of daily life that we took for granted in the United States are now things that require a lot of attention and effort and energy. There's a lot of research that we have to do wherever we are. Where are we going next? How do we get there? When we get there, how do we get around? Where are we going to sleep? What are we going to eat? Can we cook at the places we are? If so, what's on offer at the grocery store? Just little things like that. Going to the grocery store itself in particular has become exhausting. Because if we have a kitchen, we look, well, what kind of pots and pans do they have? Do they have spatulas? Do they have utensils? And then once we determine what we have to work with, we go to the grocery store and think, okay, well, what ingredients do they sell in this country? What can we make with those? It's just
The
constant.
answer is pasta and vegetables, always.
And tuna salad.
Right.
Lots of tuna salad. So just little things that you don't even think of back in the States have become just a big daily constant effort with lots of research, lots of planning. We've been here in Santiago on our second day, and instead of seeing the sights in the museum and the attractions, we figured out how to do our laundry. We figured out how to use the bus system, though we haven't used it yet. We've scoured the city for working ATMs, and we've gone to the grocery store twice. The challenge, well, also a challenge through all this is that, is being cut off from everything familiar, being cut off from all our friends at Sunday Assembly, all our other friends in Atlanta, all the things we used to do, and just the feeling of isolation that could come from that, and just leaving ourselves on our own and being lonely. We've reached out and met some people here and there along the way. Leah's Spanish is getting better and better. Mine is still kind of functional. I can ask how much things cost and get by in a store, and that's about it. So finding people to interact with is just a challenge. The main thing that we have to stay focused on is, and we have to make a choice to do this, is to remember that what we're doing is awesome. This is something that we're never going to regret having done, that we're going to look back on for the rest of our lives and say, wow, we did that, we accomplished that, we explored a big chunk of the world at ground level, not from the organized tour, not from the 20th story of a high-rise hotel. We were down there on the streets, inching our way along a whole other part of the world. And we just have to stay focused on that. Despite the frustrations, the problems, the irritation, the annoyances. Just one little story I'll tell for myself about this. We were in the city of Vicuña in Chile, which is right on the edge of where the desert starts turning into the more green parts of the Central Valley, and where they make all the wine and distill all the pisco. It's also an astro-tourism center of this continent. If you think about astronomy, you know they have some really big, important observatories down here, because northern Chile has the clearest skies you're going to find anywhere on the planet. So we wanted to appreciate some of that. So in Vicuña, they have observatories where you can go and take a tour and see the stars. Getting there, getting the tickets, getting up to the observatory was frustrating in the extreme. Trying to determine which tickets we needed, which bus we were supposed to get on, and being in a pack of 20 English-speaking tourists with 60 other Spanish-speaking tourists, half of whom were high school kids, we think, yelling, running around, just feeling crowded out, feeling like, man, why am I here? I just put a telescope at Saturn. I've seen Saturn before. What's the big deal? Then the tour guide pointed south in the sky to the Large Magellanic Cloud. Now, if you don't know what that is, the Large Magellanic Cloud is a galaxy close to the Milky Way that orbits our own. It's like a moon of the Milky Way. There are two. There's the large and the small Magellanic Clouds. You can only see them in the southern hemisphere. Now, I'm an astronomy nerd. I mean, astronomy was my first career path choice way back in my college days. So I've read about these things, I've heard about these things, and I never thought that I would see them. And then all of a sudden, the guy pointed them out, and there they were, and I just stared at them for minutes on end. Just a big fuzzy patch in the sky, but I was staring at another galaxy. And I had the closest thing an atheist can have to a religious experience. Enormous grand object in the sky that it had just never clicked to me that I was going to see this thing that I had never thought I was going to be able to see in my life. And that one moment made all of the annoyance and irritation and frustration getting up there worth it. And that has happened many times for Leah and I on this trip. And it's going to happen many more times because we still have a long way to go. In 1 month, we're going to spend the longest day of the year on the southernmost tip of the continent that you can be without being in Antarctica itself. So we're looking forward to that and everything else we see up the Atlantic coast. So I'm going to sign off for now. A quick plug. If you'd like to hear more about our adventures, you can follow my advertisement-free blog at theescapehatch.net. That's theescapehatch.net. And I post new articles every Monday, and you can see where we are, where we've been, what we're doing, and what weird little thing we had to figure out this week. So thank you guys. Hope things are going great in Atlanta. Don't burn the city down before we get back. And I'll see you then.
actually, Louis, one of those tabs is the blog, if you want to just open it up real quick. Yeah, so that's him, I guess, talking a little bit about, that trip. I think one of his recent blog posts is complaining that the beaches on Chile are cold, which is great. So, anyway, I'll be getting those emails and following them along on this awesome journey that they've gone on, which I've never done something that huge in that day, so it's really, really cool. But of course, they are missed. If you've been doing something before, you know that Jared is like often right over here singing his heart out to like a Queen song or something. So he and Leah are dearly missed. But let's continue. Oh, there it is. There was the video. We are learning. We are learning as we go. So up next, we have our speaker. Deborah is, what particular role do you have in Science.Art.Wonder? Is it just...
I'm an executive member.
Okay, excellent. I'll let her explain more about Science.Art.Wonder, but as you can see, it's an effort to connect, the sciences and the arts by connecting literally professors and students who want to make art about what they do. And I think there's going to be a little bit of an interactive thing involving cell phones, so feel free to get those ready. But first, let's welcome up Deborah.
Hello, as mentioned, my name is Deborah. I'm a sophomore at Emory University, and I'm an exec member at Science for a club called Science.Art.Wonder. And so, I'll just jump right into it. So, I will start my presentation with a quote that I think embodies this presentation really well, and it's a quote by Leonardo Da Vinci, and he said, "To develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn how to see, and realize that everything connects to everything else." So, I'm going to start with the interactive part, and if you guys have cell phones, which in this age I feel like you should, you can text to 22333 and type in that phrase, Deborah Song 929. And I'm going to first ask you the question, what does science mean to you? So you're going to type in just one word that reminds you of science. It can be data, lab, truth, anything. So if you see Ross on the...
You want to swap over to it?
Yeah, just swap over to it.
Let's do it. Should be the rest of that.
It should
It's
be
one of those tabs.
the McLean, yeah.
Nope. Yeah, right. There you go.
Okay, insight. We have one. Curiosity, okay. Experience, good. So I'll give you guys like a few more seconds to put some ideas in. Okay, so I think we can lock it now. Yeah. And so from this like word bubble that we all did, let's choose one. I think measure. Okay, measure is a cool one. And so let's use the word measure to embody like this entire word bubble. And then now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to ask you, think of a word that reminds you of art. So if you pull up the next tab and activate it, yes. And now you can submit a word that will remind you of art. Very, very deep. Expression, beauty. Cool, cool.
I assume size correlates with number of people.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we have a lot, so we can now lock it and choose one. So the biggest one being to our presentation, and from those two word bubbles, I chose measure and beauty. So from those two poles, could measure and beauty be combined? Could experiments and color be combined? And that's the whole basis of like this presentation that I'm doing, and showing how those two can intersect. So certainly with like what we saw with the word bubble from science and what we saw from the word bubble from art, it could seem as if science and art are these two independent factors, but if you learn more of science, and I don't know how many of you guys have professions in science, but you will learn, as you learn more and more of that field, you realize how much more art is a part of your work. And same for the other side, as you do more of art, you think more of how science can integrate into your masterpieces. So, I feel like in the past, the best representation of like this epitome of the balance between science and art is Leonardo Da Vinci. So he really pushed the boundaries of artwork by kind of using both perspectives of beauty and science to affect the way that the viewer will see his artwork. So here we have, I mean, I'm sure everyone here knows Leonardo da Vinci, but if you don't know, I mean, he drew the Mona Lisa, and I guess he applied scientific perspective in one of his famous paintings called The Last Supper. And here you see kind of like the perspective framework of that painting. And you can see how he mathematically calculated how the implied lines in the painting will kind of join together to a convergence point. And so through this, he was not only painting aesthetically, but he was painting with numbers. So I think that's the best, you know, he's a really, as I titled it, steamy genius. Yeah, and then of course, you know, he's very well known for his sketches of inventions and new techniques in engineering, and yes. So first I will talk about the first relationship between science and art. So for scientists and artists, their weaknesses lie on the strengths of the other. So people can get lost in both worlds. For sciences, numbers and lines and all of these like phrases can get dry and confusing. And same for the other side. Art can get like way too abstract and confusing. And so when the artist and science come together, they realize that although their form of communication may be different, what they want to ultimately tell to the public is the same. So they want to communicate a certain perspective in new ways. And so that is the beauty of their combination, and I'm just going to show you guys a few pictures of like science and art combining. But scientists may struggle in communicating to a wider audience that is not often exposed to such complex ideas. And the artist may struggle in communicating to a wider audience who is not often exposed to such abstract ideas. And so when they are together, they have this perfect way of like strengthening each other's communication. Yeah, and so of course there's MC Escher. Who else do I have? Oh, this is like a common theme of like when you type in science and art on Google, there's like the Fibonacci sequence on a whole bunch of paintings. So yeah. So here we have an abstract from one of our researchers in our club. Her name is Eri Saikawa, and she creates such creative and very outstanding ideas of just environmental science, and her research is very like forward. But when you see this abstract from one of her research papers, it's really easy to get lost in the sauce. Like, you don't know some of these phrases, it's very technical. But take this artwork from Nele Azeved. And he installed 1,000 tiny ice sculptures of men in Australia, and he used the environment surrounding the artwork to cleverly form a thesis against it. So this definitely shows you more of the emotional effect of environmental science. And so in a way, both of this art piece kind of combined those two aspects of air pollution and global warming, along with the visual aspect of it. So, certainly, the abstract and the artwork both reveal the truth. So, both the artists and scientists wanted to give their perspective on air pollution, but by combining these different representations, we both received the ideas from the logos side, the logical side, which is the research, and the pathos side, which is the more emotional, the art aspect. Yeah. And so, I forgot to mention. Since science represents itself through logos and not much of pathos, for example, while reading a paper about string theory, you might not really think about the emotional value behind string theory. And same for the other side, like art can represent itself through pathos and not much of logos. So when looking at a surrealistic painting of Dali and his melting clocks painting, it's hard to see like the logical reasoning behind that. And so for these embodiments of logos and pathos, the former can easily forget about the latter. And by combining both art and science, the logos and pathos, in a sense, ultimately intensifies the communicative goal that both of them are trying to do. All right, so for the second relationship, so I'm going to turn more to the present and say that there's a really fast-paced movement, at least in my opinion, of how schools and university projects are really trying to combine this aspect of science and art. And when these two combine, they can form more creative ideas, and they both elevate each other. So, for example, the development of ideas and technologies and paradigm shifts in the sciences can elevate art. And one example of this is like architecture. When physicists research different ways that gravity can flow downwards and new ways that will allow humans to manipulate it, artists, in effect, will create really cool architectural sculptures and buildings. Likewise for art, as you can see here, as art has new forms of capabilities of expression, they will be able to form animations and 3D models and possibly hypothetical experiments for researchers and even aesthetic values of robotics, which may even help their function. So, that all connects with our goal of our club, Science.Art.Wonder. And who we are is, who are we, sorry. We are an Emory University-based club who matches artists and researchers on campus or around Atlanta, and they come together to create this ultimate piece of artwork that will be showcased in events around Atlanta. So that's the basis of who we are, and our mission, again, is from the first half of my presentation, basically is communicating the capability and this wonderful effect that can happen, or wonderful reaction that can happen from science and art combining. And so, I will go through the process of what we do. And the artist first applies through a link, and the researcher applies if they are interested in having this partnership. And by the end of October, they match, and they meet, and they think of ideas that both will create, like both the scientific validity of like each art the validity of the artwork that the artist creates, but also an aesthetic appeal that will, again, be exposed to a wider audience. And then we showcase it. So I will show you a few examples of the artwork that we had last year. The first one is from Alex. She's actually here, and she was partnered with Dr. Sementelli. And to give a very, I guess, brief summary of this artwork is basically she showed how proteins and ions self-assemble into really complex structures. And when they do this, it's like it's called a redox reaction. And the process she used to dye the silk in this artwork is also a redox reaction. So she kind of used both aspects of science and art. I feel like I'm saying that phrase a lot. Here's the second artwork. It's the partnership between Dr. Wu and Madsen. And Dr. Wu researches the biomechanics of elephant trunks. And ultimately what Madsen was trying to show was the elephant is pretty obvious, but also the future applications of her research. So is it going to be used in a positive light, such as disaster relief machinery? Or is it going to be used in a negative light, such as military equipment? So that kind of duality is seen in her artwork. And then our third example is one from a researcher who did her own artwork. So this is one by Dr. Carol Cieles, and she is an astrophysicist. And she studies a lot of cool stuff, but mainly the ripples of space-time and black holes. So here she showed a process through acrylic pour, how two stars meet together, and when they meet together and like they're in the same, like, I guess, like resonate the same way, a beam of light just like flashes through, and then a black hole is formed. So she kind of like showed the process through her artwork. And then the fourth one we have is between Dr. Jakey and Daniel So. So he is showing how he is showing the sharing and the behavior of cooperation and food sharing between bonobos. Sorry, I'm like running out of breath. But so in the first kind of line, you see bonobos sharing, a very abstract figure of like bonobos sharing, and they're all connected. But in the background, you also see the chemical structure of oxytocin, which is the hormone that is used of sharing between bonobos. And then lastly, we have a very simple one, but it is between Dr. Taylor and Amy Lambeth. And Dr. Taylor researches nodes in systems and networks that interact within Atlanta. So Amy Lambeth kind of showed Atlanta on a chip and showed the flow and energy of people and technologies on this chip component. So yeah, those are a few examples of our showcase, of our artwork that we got last year. And now for showcasing. So we have showcased around Atlanta Science Festival, and there you can see we also did like a interactive mural along for the kids who passed by. We also had an event on campus, so we had artwork just hanging around in the chemistry building and in the main students, we call it Whitehall, and in the quad, even outside. And then this is how we got to be able to connect. This is how we were able to be connected with Sunday Assembly. We also went to the Rally for Science. And so, yeah. And for SAW, I feel like it can be confusing for people at first, but the lasting impact that we want to show in the end is the two relationships of science that I first mentioned. Is that, firstly, when you have this connection between science and art, it kind of shows both the pathos and logos, and will be presented to a wider audience. And of course, we also want to show the second relationship, where science and art can elevate each other. And then I'm going to conclude with like a whole cycle of coming back to Leonardo Da Vinci's quote of how he said, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art and the art of science. So I kind of saw that as like the logos of art and the pathos of science. And learn how to see. So because of that combination, we get new perspectives on how we see around our world. And then realize that everything connects to everything else. So because of that connection, we can see a world in a way with more curiosity, whether it's about science, whether it's about art, or whether it's about questions about society or human condition. So that is my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. That was delightful. My understanding is that as students, you have finals coming up, and you have many other obligations. We always have a potluck after our assemblies, but Deborah told me she might not be able to be at that because, as I said, exams, difficult exams that I thankfully haven't had to do for a little bit, and I'm grateful for that. So let's see. What is next? I do believe that we are doing another song that relates to art and science, and that's going to involve the work coming up here. Let's see, it's going to be Sail. I'm trying to think. This song, I don't know if it's the most tambourine oriented. I will say that. But I'm pretty sure everybody knows this one. And so, feel free to sing along. Mm-hmm.
We may not break the instruments. Oh, I'm wrong, Tim. I'm wrong. Actually, you look like you were so ready to come up here and do Life Happens. But instead, we're going to have actually something very different, which is the Icebreaker. We have assorted items collected over here that, at least, among some organizers, we're like, these seem like they connect art and science. I don't know, you guys figure it out. What I would love for folks to be able to do is maybe get in small groups of, like 3 or 4 just around you, maybe like nominate a person who is going to be the designated person who comes up here and picks out a strange thing and brings it back to talk about. And talk about, hey, what is the intersection between like, what artistry, what creativity went into this, and what scientific principles are evoked from this. And maybe about halfway through we can trade around, or if you get tired of your, I think there's a slinky up here. Not that anyone would ever get tired of a slinky, of course, but if you get tired of that, you can trade it with somebody else. So, let's get groups together and bring one person up here, and we will have all of you set out. Louis, feel free to put on some music. How many? Oh, wait, I said 3 or 4. I said 3 or 4. Cool. Did anybody else talk about something that wasn't in there? Like Trey, you were showing off your guitar. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, I was using that resonator for the music box.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good. What did that music box even play? Do you know? That makes sense. Okay, got it. Anybody else? Any interesting observations on random stuff you looked at? No, the slinky was just a slinky. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, well, thank you. Up next, we actually do have Tim. I'm sorry I held him off as long as I could, but unfortunately he does have stage time now. He's going to do a very nice thing and tell us all about how we're all doing. So let's give him a hand.
The suspense is killing me. So, our next section is called Life Happens. This is an activity that we do as part of our overarching goal of promoting connection and community among ourselves, getting to know each other. And oftentimes when we come to an assembly, we get to say hi, exchange a few words, but you don't necessarily get to hear how the person's really been doing. So this is an opportunity to share times that life has happened to you, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. And it can be happy, it can be sad, it can be neutral. If it's happy, feel free to cheer or clap. If it's sad, in lieu of awkward silence, let's give some snaps of support. Yep, okay. And here we go. Our first card is from Dan Bateman, who says, my mom, Jerry, is here for Thanksgiving and is with us today. Welcome, Mom. Glad you're here. So glad you're here. Our next card is from Ross, who says, I did a load of laundry in my own home. This is surprisingly a big deal while half my home is being renovated. Awesome job, Ross. Our next card is from Andy, who says, my friend and I were recently honored to be given 2 additional opportunities to co-lead our Dying Well event, and we're grateful to witness some amazing transformations in several of the participants, and we've got another great one lined up for December. They are going great, and people seem to be getting a lot out of them, so now we begin the courageous task of putting other people's money where our mouths are when we start charging, lest we continue practicing an increasingly expensive hobby. All right, awesome. Thank you, Andy. All right, our next card is from Lisa and Steve, who say, thank you all so much for the beautiful flower arrangement sent for my mother's funeral. Our Sunday Assembly family's love and support means so much to us. Lots of love to Lisa and Steve. Okay, our next card is from Louis, who says, headed to New Orleans for vacation. We'll need the break because we have lots coming up, mostly planning for the March for Science in 2019. Thank you. Our next card is from me. I'm excited to announce that I'll be sleeping in my own bed in my own apartment for the first time in 4 months or something. My life has been, I'm improvising this, so you can't tell. My life's been a lot of up and downs recently, but I'm happy to say that things have gotten a lot better. I started working at Emory and as a study abroad advisor, and moved into an apartment today, and have my roommate and friend with me, Jett. So thank you all very much. That's Okay, our next card is a mystery from Anonymous, who says, I quit the job that I was working when I first came to Sunday Assembly.
I was trying to keep.
Trying to keep when I first came to Sunday Assembly, scared I could not keep it. I realized it was not a good fit for me, not healthy actually, so I'll be underemployed in December. I visited an artist open home on Saturday, and although I am not an artist, I found their stories about their work inspiring. Thank you very much. Okay, next card is from Ray. It says, I confessed to my mom this past week that I don't believe in God. She took it surprisingly well. She's 87 and has been going to church her entire life. When I told her, it was like my 401k had just lost 0.5% of its value, but not that big of a deal. As I left, she told me she didn't love me any less. Thank you for sharing. Our next card is also anonymous and says, I am simply grateful. Our next card is from Giselle, who says, the doctor wanted me to come in. There were signs from previous visits that I may have had a stroke due to diabetes complications. Long story short, it came back negative. As complications with diabetes have been making things complicated, I'm happy to see support from friends rolling in. Family, friends, I love you all. And our last card is from Laura. It says, on my third foster cat family, this one is a mama cat and her daughter, who is now a month old. Both are so cute. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Deborah, for your story, joys and sorrows. And when life happens to you, please feel free to share in our ongoing segment. Thank you.
I'm glad you lined, I guess, a card with your name on it. Because I guess, you could just start talking about your life, which is fine.
I put the link in there for my...
Oh, excellent. So up next we have Kevin, who's going to lead us in our moment of mindfulness. And he's already almost all the way up here. So, I don't say anything else.
Hello. Like Wes said, I'm Kevin. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. We have, Sunday Assembly, we try to help often, wonder more, and live better. Under the auspices of Live Better, we have 3 options to have mindfulness every week. There's one in Roswell that meets on Sunday evenings. There's one in Kennesaw/Ackworth that meets on Monday evenings. And we have a Wednesday night group that meets around kind of northeast Atlanta, so Tucker, Peachtree Corners area. So, I really appreciated the talk we had today because we talked about different approaches to truth. In Sunday Assembly, we're often a very skeptical bunch here. And we tend to approach things with a skeptical scientific mind point. But there can be other ways to look for truth, one of them being art, science. Sometimes they interconnect. Like I love how the string theorists use beauty to try to look at their equations. And oftentimes the equations that are most beautiful are the ones that are true. So that kind of points to the deep underlying connection and everything. And another way we can approach that is through introspection and meditation. And it can be secular, it doesn't have to necessarily be religious. And that's kind of what we do here, is that we take some traditions from ancient religions, we try to apply them in our own lives, take what works, So what we'll do now is just go through a brief meditation, just some brief instructions, very simple. And if you're interested after the assembly, you can feel free to come and talk to me about meditation. And I, for one, will talk your ear off, because it's been really helpful in my life. So, if anybody, if you don't mind, just sit comfortably in your chair. Let gravity kind of pull you into your seat. If you feel comfortable, maybe close your eyes, sit up tall, take a few deep breaths, and just sit and be aware of the contents of what your mind is doing. Just breathe deeply and just slowly and softly begin to pay attention to the feelings of your breath as it comes in and out. Just the mere sensations, wherever you feel most prominent. As you're sitting, you'll notice possibly that your thoughts will wander. You'll start thinking about what you're going to do after all the wonderful food we're about to eat. That's okay. Just take notice of that. Gently bring your attention back to the breathing. And that's it. You've meditated for 1 minute. No, we're all Buddhists. So, like I said, if you want to talk about meditation afterwards, you can feel free to come and talk to me. It can be used as a tool to enhance your life, or you can use it maybe to try to find your life truth for things. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. All right, up next we have our collection, which is usually done with a song. So I'll invite the band up, or whoever is playing the They Might Be Giants song coming up. So Sunday Assembly, it costs money to do what we do, to have the spaces that we do, to run our meetup, to pay for the equipment. We just found out 2 more. Maybe one of our mics is not working right. This is the kind of stuff that happens. In order to do this kind of stuff and host the small groups that we have, that Kevin just talked about, we have to pay for some of that. And so I'm really grateful for the recurring donors, the handful of folks who give monthly without even thinking about it. That's invaluable. But another huge part of it is this very moment when you're listening to a silly song about dimensions and different sizes of humans or not humans. That you think about, hey, this is worth supporting, because that would mean a lot. Baskets are going to be passed around where you can throw in cash into, but we also do PayPal and Venmo, and we have credit card readers back there somewhere. And also buying any of our t-shirts later on is a perfectly good way to support us too. So I am going to leave the stage and get on my phone, and let's do a fun song.
Please underwood.
might be able to stay up here because we have announcements and then the last song. So if you'd like to chill out for a minute. Yeah, you can chill. Yeah, so thanks for enjoying that song. I like They Might Be Giants, and if you don't, well, you know, we all have our own opinions. So, we have lots of small group events, and you already heard Kevin talk about some of the meditation things we do. Coming up in the near future, we have a Wonder Club, which we do usually on the last Friday of the month. This one's going to be on the concept of You Are a Leader. And that takes place at the Rush Center, which is not too far from here, just down the street a little bit. And that's a really fun kind of discussion, kind of oriented group. It's really cool. We have a book club coming up December 7th on how to change your mind, and that's going to be at Holly's, who I don't think is here, but that doesn't change where she lives, so that's going to be it. Talking TED, which is pretty simple. Watch a cool TED Talk and talk about it. It's going to be on the 21st Century Education Reform, and it'll be on December 1st. 7 p.m. That's going to be at Anna's house, and she is here. And that also still does not change the location, so that's good. And our holiday potluck, which is going to be, we did this last year, it's literally on Christmas Day, but the evening of it, when most people are not doing anything other than maybe going to see a Star Wars movie or something. And that's going to be also at the restaurant. And this is kind of fun because we brought in other groups like the Atlanta Free Thought Society and Black Non-Believers and Atlanta Atheists. We invite as many people as possible. Like, hey, if like the holidays are a time that's kind of rough for you, if like you don't kind of buy into these different traditions or something, that's okay. Here's a fun place to hang out and eat food and talk with like-minded folks. Our next assembly, which is distinct from that holiday potluck, by the way, that's going to be on the 16th of December. As usual, the third Sunday of the month, just like we're in right now. And it's going to be at the same place, right here. And it's going to be our Yule Rock, which is where we do way more like holiday-oriented songs. Jesus probably won't come up, so don't worry about that. And it's really fun, and we kind of rotate through all sorts of different things. We'll probably have less structure, no speaker or anything like that. A plea for, get involved. Like, the only way that any of this happens is by awesome people who are willing to, learn and put in time and energy, right? Like the band meets every week, and they rehearse up these songs, and they, put their heart into trying to, make people have some fun. And, same with anyone who puts on smaller events or helps facilitate the assembly in all sorts of little ways. Any bit you can be contributing is really, really valuable. So as we're going into, 2019, why not think about like, hey, that could be something I incorporated in my life. I could do this one small thing. I could take on inviting people in my home to do something cool. Like, think about that, and feel free to talk to any organizer. Talk to me. I would love to hear your idea for a cool thing you would like to do under our green triangle-oriented umbrellas. T-shirts on sale, $10. They are back. Well, they're not there anymore. The potluck is consuming all of the tables. No, they're still over there. They are purple. They look dope. What they look like because Teresa is for them, and they are great. I recently visited some folks in Nashville, and they were really into them too, because folks in Nashville have good fashion sense. Now, when you do that, it makes it seem like I don't like the wonderful people in Nashville. And I don't know how to take away of the dumb tish, but I want to take it away. It's difficult, isn't it? Nashville, I appreciate you. Anyway, and a more broad thank you. If you brought stuff for the potluck, if you came, which all of you did, thank you. I really appreciate it. Let's finish up with a fun song. Has anybody heard of what is this movie called? This Rocky Horror Picture Show? Have you heard of this? This is a weird. Never heard of this. Anyway, it's a really cool, popular song that was covered by Joan, Jett, and made way more punk rock, and in my opinion, awesome. No offense to the original, but I think we all really liked how Get Up and Go this one is. So this is definitely a standout, clap along. You'll probably get the chorus pretty soon. So let's all get up and let's sing this one song as we head to the bottom. Oh, you may do it. I will. That's how it's
minutes potluck. Thank you so much, McLean. I really appreciate it. Yes, yes. If anybody could help bring some of those tables in so people can eat on them, and then chairs will be kind of arranged around them, that would be amazing. And we've got one more song, very art-focused.
Have to put this on.